why Leetcode is so popular. That's what we're going to read today. This is from Ryan Peterman, and this popped up in my inbox. He's the developing dev, staff software engineer at Instagram. I've been getting his emails for a while, and I thought this was an interesting article. He's got some good points. I still think it's tough if you're in the job market, and it really means that if you want to pursue the big companies, you're going to have to look at Leetcode and work on it a little bit more. And maybe this is something that I have to do if I'm going to pursue these companies. I've done a bit, but it feels like I have to do even more because of the competition right now. So, hey, my name is Paul Solt from Super Easy Apps. We're going to talk about Leetcode today. Is it better or worse than doing take-homes? Let's find out. And I'm going to read this article, and we're going to talk about my experiences applying to companies this past year in 2024. Every time I mention interviews, I get frustrated comments about Leetcode. So then, why is it so popular? It's because it actually does a decent job, although there's room for improvement. To understand this, it's helpful to think through the big problem that big tech is trying to solve in their hiring process. Why is Leetcode so common in big tech? Let's find out. Top companies, example, FANG or Big N, have an insane volume of job applicants. Even if you filter out the obviously bad ones, you still have hundreds of applicants, if not more, per available position. And this is what I'm up against. These companies need to find outstanding candidates without spending too much time on each candidate. Leetcode does a decent job of filtering, since in just 45 minutes, they can assess your ability to produce working code and to solve a problem. Although the Leetcode problems are often much harder than what you would do on the job, that's by design. Remember that there's a huge pool of people who are just trying to filter through. False negatives, like good software engineers who can't do Leetcode, aren't a problem because big tech companies have so many options. Besides, I'd challenge the point that Leetcode doesn't test the skills that you need. There are many other signals these companies gather from the interviews aside from your algorithm problem solving. They also test your ability to write code, test that code, and communicate through the process. Okay, while I agree with him on this, I feel like I'm really good at coding, and I'm really good at problem solving. I'm really good at communicating. I'm really good at testing code. And if I don't finish a Leetcode within a time window, and I don't have it perfect within a time window, I'm being discarded. So like, I value watching someone work through Leetcode. I value seeing someone problem solve. I think the challenging part is having that person go so fast. That's where I think I have the biggest problem with Leetcode. Like, show me that you can do something, show me that you can code. But does it really have to be under 10 minutes? Does it really have to be under 15 minutes? Does it really have to be under 25 minutes? Like, writing code is hard. And just because I can write a Leetcode fast, I don't think that is an indication of my ability as an engineer. So that's my take on it. So why Leetcode isn't bad for candidates. Let's take a look at this section. So if the companies didn't ask Leetcode questions, how would they filter candidates? There's some ideas I can think of, but they're gameable or expensive to implement at scale. So the first one that we have is practical interview problems. Imagine interview questions that dump you into the middle of a large code base. Debugging or implementing a feature here would match the job better. The issue here is that would be a lot of work to design these questions and then to build a process around them. And I've had a few technical interviews where I've been in this situation where they give me, it's not a huge code base, but it's more of a project, and they're like, debug all of the issues here. Show me fix the code, get it working. And I like those. I still like finishing it, and maybe it's just the other candidates I'm up against. Maybe I don't get as far as other people. Maybe I don't do it the right way. I did one, and I was so obsessed with getting a Swift UI view preview working with some mock data that I could have probably debugged the stuff sooner had I just run the app. And so that's like an oversight on myself. It was like a audible call that I was like, which way do I go? Which way do I go? Okay, let's get Swift preview working because they're going to value that because then I can write unit tests. And they didn't care. They just wanted the code to work. They wanted me to find the bugs. They didn't care about testing. They didn't care about preview. They just wanted me to find the bugs in the code. And so I approached that problem wrong. My mistake. All right. So reviewing some software you build or doing work trials. This would provide the strongest signal, but it's too time consuming for both the candidate and the company. So like you doing a pet project. I did one of these for another company. They paid me $150, but then I didn't make it to the next round. So they have a whole process on it. That was kind of cool. I got paid over PayPal, but it didn't go anywhere. No one's really reviewed software I've built. I wish they did. I mean, that's how I got my internships at Apple. My internship at Apple was showing off what I did with computer graphics. And I don't know. That would be nice, but they think it's too time consuming. Ryan does. And it's true. So asking for references from past employers. This signal is biased and too easy to cheat. Candidates can easily give these companies the contact information for their friends, not to mention that the bar isn't consistent across companies. Yeah, I probably wouldn't value references. I want to see someone code. I don't mind Leetcode. I just don't like the level of perfection that I feel like the market is looking for with Leetcode. Okay, so without interview processes that filter well at scale, big tech companies would need to look towards other methods. Maybe they would care more about your GPA, the college you attended, or the prestige of places you've worked at. This feels less equitable than Leetcode. I've seen plenty of people from non-prestigious backgrounds get into big tech because they studied Leetcode. It feels meritocratic that if someone wants the job enough, meritocratic, I don't know how to say that word. Meritocratic? I would never use this word. If someone wants a job enough, they can will their way into being good at Leetcode. And I think that's true. I think with practice, like I've seen myself improve. I'm not against doing Leetcode. I just don't want to grind it when I want to be doing app development and making something versus just doing arbitrary challenges. I definitely see value in doing Leetcode over the long term, and it's something I will probably want to do a few times throughout the year. Like I really want to do, total side note, Advent of Code. I really want to do this. I am late to the party. One of my classmates from RIT started this, Eric Wassel. So these are challenges. This is the type of thing I want to be doing, not Leetcode problems. So I'll have a link for that down below. All right, where were we? So although Leetcode isn't perfect at big tech scale, the alternatives also have problems. All right. I agree to some extent. I agree 100% probably. I like to see people code live. Like as challenging as it is for me to do it when I've interviewed people, or just even talking about their projects and showing off something, like I value that a lot. And if you can explain the code and talk through it, like that's valuable. There's too much momentum to expect large companies to change their interview processes soon. However, smaller companies are starting to ask more practical questions, which feels like a step in the right direction. A buddy of mine recently went through the interview process and got many coding questions that weren't Leetcode. These were from relatively large companies, example, Figma, Stripe, too. His Leetcode prep was more than enough to succeed on these practical questions. And I think this is good. I did see an example of this when I interviewed with Peloton. It was basically project-based. I was given a basic outline for an app. I built it in Swift UI, and then we sort of iterated on it over time and just sort of added features and talked through things and explained things. And there was a few like technical questions. We just talked about it. So I like those types of interviews. If you hate Leetcode that much, the solution is simple. Just don't apply to the biggest temp companies. There are plenty of smaller companies which don't use the same interview processes. And this is totally true. Like the companies that I'm going after, the reason that I'm struggling is I'm going after bigger companies. I'm not going after the smaller companies, which I know would probably be less competitive because I want to target the big companies. And it's like now or never. So like, let's try and get a foot in the door. Let's try to go big. I'm not going to settle for something small. So that's kind of my take. I want to make sure that it's a valuable experience. So for me, this is Ryan, Leetcode was a no-brainer because of the companies I was interested in. Although it was a big time investment, I felt like I would certainly get a return on it, not because I'm amazing at Leetcode, but because we're lucky in software engineering that there are so many companies to apply to that have a similar process. Even though there is randomness in hiring outcomes, I felt I would always get something with enough shots and the right prep. I'm curious how much time Ryan spent. Hiring processes are a complex topic, and although this writing is relatively pro Leetcode, I'm sure there is a better way. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts on how you think this process could be better. Also, please share if you've had any non-Leetcode interview experiences recently. I've had a couple of take-homes. Like the challenge is, like, if you don't do Leetcode, you've got to do some kind of project-based coding, which takes probably more time on the company to set up and then to grade and to go through. And I think I like that live coding aspect a little bit more than a Leetcode challenge, or like a blend of the two. Like I had one where I had to implement flood fill algorithms. So it's like depth first search for filling in random spaces in a randomized grid. And I used Swift UI views, but then I redid it afterwards and did it with the canvas because I hadn't worked with the canvas yet in Swift UI. So I like that one. I don't think I finished some aspect of that in the interview, and it took me another 10 or 20 minutes to finalize, and I sent it to them, but I think I got rejected from that one. So it's hard. I think the biggest challenge is I feel like it's so competitive that if you are unable to complete the challenge within the time limit, you are basically deemed not good enough and discarded. And I think that's the real challenge here is we're so focused on perfection, mainly because of an oversupply of developers. So it's a harder market to get your foot in the door at these bigger companies because they are constantly raising the bar in what they deem acceptable or exceptional, someone that they would want to add to the team. And unfortunately, I think this coding side of things carries a ton of weight. And they're willing, like Ryan was talking about, to pass on a good developer who's just not as fast. And I think that's challenging. And the only way you get faster is to practice. I think when I interviewed with Meta, I was asked to implement LRU cache. I have a video on it. I spent a lot of time working on what is the proper solution for this. I don't think I'd have to refresh my memory on how to do it. And there's probably better tricks for things that I wasn't thinking about to do it faster. And that's kind of what doing, like, even if you just do the easy problems on Leetcode, you're going to become a better developer because you're going to get exposure to some of those APIs that you don't use all the time, and that it can transfer over to some of the other code you're going to write. It can help you think about the problem differently. I definitely valued time doing that. The thing I don't like is it is so hard. It is frustrating. And I think you have to set time limits. And this is how I would do it differently. Like, I spent 6 or 9 hours, like, just trying to figure out, like, what's the best solution? How can I write this? And I wanted to spend time without looking at the solution because I wanted to dig in. I wanted to hit my head against the wall and, like, really optimize it and then figure out how I could do it faster. I have a few videos where I worked on doing a linked list from scratch and doing it as fast as possible. I did it with the Apple Vision on. I did it. And it's just like coming up with the code that I need to write using optionals and making the code work with optionals and then thinking about the edge cases. It's like there's a lot of things to consider when you're implementing a linked list. And I don't think that making a linked list is good on its own, but it gets you into that thinking mode and it gets you into doing it yourself. You definitely want to leverage existing collections. Like, it's not good. I think the creator of C++ said, don't make linked lists. They're not good. They've got downsides. But that's fine. It's just an interview question. So I really appreciate when I've interviewed at companies and they valued, like, the projects that I've talked about, or I've been able to show what I've done. Like, when I can show what I've done, I feel like that carries more weight. But if it's just on the resume, no one ever sees it. And that's my challenge, maybe with my current resume. Maybe I need links to my apps. I don't have any links to the apps. I did on an earlier version of my resume, so maybe I'll make that change. But I don't know if people click on links. Like, I don't know. I have a portfolio site that I typically send that's got links, that's got pictures. When it comes back to Leetcode, like, to get into these bigger companies, I need more practice just because it's a skill and it atrophies if you don't do it. You have to practice it. You have to remember how to work with arrays. You have to remember how to work with matrices. You have to remember how to do weird things that you just don't do on a normal basis and come up with solutions. You can't. The thing I don't like is everyone talks about, oh, they just want to see your thinking process, but they don't really care. If you've never seen the problem and you come up with a solution, you cannot solve it in the time required. Like, if you're a decent programmer and you see a Leetcode and there's some trick, there's some obscure thing that maybe you can't deduce, you're not going to solve it in an hour. You're not going to solve it in 30 minutes. You're not going to solve it in 15 minutes. And so that's why it's so important to practice Leetcode and to just do the work. Is you need to build up some of those thought processes so that when you do see a problem, you can be like, oh, I've seen something like this. I've got an idea of how to approach it, and this is the code I'm going to write. I think the most frustrating thing of Leetcode challenges is that learning is very difficult, and that's really why you have to time box it. So if I'm going to practice Leetcode, I'm going to set a timer for 30 to 60 minutes. I'm going to try and do the challenge, and I'm going to do it early in the day when I have a lot of willpower and I'm willing to do the work and I'm willing to struggle and I'm willing to fail, versus when I'm tired and frustrated and just I'm not in a good mood for figuring out this code challenge. So I think that's really important. Know when your energy level is going to be at its maximum, and then tackle the Leetcode then. I think you're going to get a lot of benefit out of that. Oh, I don't know. I don't like the state where it's like if you don't finish, you're not even considered. But I can see their side of it is I've got 10 candidates, 5 of them never got to a solution, 5 of them got to a solution. Let's look at those 5 because maybe they're better. But are they better? I don't know. I think it would depend on how close they got and how they enjoyed listening to the person communicate. Like, I don't know what the grading rubric is. And I don't know what a grading rubric should be. I'm fine with coding in interviews. It's just a little frustrating when you have to do 6 to 8 interviews with a company only to get rejected. And that's kind of just the state of tech right now. So I've been through 6 full interview loops, 1 on site, and the other 5 are all remote. And it's a lot to be on for. I don't know how people do this while they have full-time jobs. Like, I met one of my high school friends at a 20-year high school reunion, and he's interviewing and he's struggling. And I was like, I can't even imagine trying to do it full-time. It's a lot of prep work. It's a lot of time dedicated to another company that you may or may not get a job offer from. And you have to take off work, or you have to say, I have an appointment. I don't know. I don't know how you do it because it is so incredibly time consuming to prep and then to actually go through the interviews, the on-site interviews. It's a lot of work. So those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this article. If you want, I'll have a link down below. Why Leetcode is so popular and why it's not that bad given the constraints. Like, can I like this? I need to sign in. I don't think it's bad. I just don't like the criteria I'm being graded on. And I think I'm capable. I think I'm intelligent. I think I'm a great problem solver. I think I have other skills besides programming that are valuable to a company. And I don't know. It's challenging to be on the job market right now. And this is coming from my experience before. GoPro was the first company I applied to after I ended a contract, and I got a job right away. I didn't have to try hard. And I had take home. I went above and beyond on that take home, and it was great. And I think that made me stand out. I've done take home for other company, and I've heard nothing, or I have to follow up, and they're like, "Oh, we're not considering you." And I spent like 26 hours on one, and that's depressing. So when you value, 26 hours on a take home versus 45 minutes to see if this is a good fit, I think I'm leaning more towards Leetcode is better. 26 hours down the toilet. I learned stuff, but I didn't get a job out of it. And so that's practice for the next job, but it kind of sucks in that job application experience because I feel like I did well, but maybe I didn't solve it fast enough. And I think that's the challenge with take homes. If they give you a window of like a week, the sooner you get it in, the better. You're racing against the clock. And I had an ultimate Frisbee tournament. So I was getting up at, I think, 6 a.m. to work on it before the tournament. I skipped one of the games. I was working on it after the tournament. I skipped the parties. I just was coding. I was coding on the airplane because I had a take home while I was doing on-site interviews with another company. And it's just a lot of work. And it was a lower commitment for the interviews for that one company. I had to prep a little bit, but it's like one screening, one recruiter meeting, and then like 5 interviews, 4 of them on site, 1 of them with the CEO. That was maybe 6 or 7 hours of interview time plus travel time. which was a lot of travel time, versus doing 26 hours and then not even progressing, not even getting another interview, and then having to potentially do 4 or 5 or 6 more interviews on top of that. Like, I like take homes, but you can only do like one at a time and you run out of time. And so that's why Leetcode style problems, or at least problems that you can solve within 45 to 60 minutes, are ideal because it gets you into someone's head. The real takeaway is that there's so many people. If you're not great at this skill, you're going to just get discarded because you're not good enough. All right. So that's my thoughts on why Leetcode is so popular, and going over and sort of commenting on this. If this was interesting, hit the like button. I teach iPhone development. I'm going to be working on a new iPhone course in Swift UI. So if you're interested in that, I'll have probably a link down below for that course, as well as this article. And if you want to do something more interesting than Leetcode, try Advent of Code. There's a ton of challenges here. This gets super hard. I've only done a few of these. I don't know how many I've finished, but I really enjoyed this style a lot more. I've done a lot of puzzle hunts and challenges when I was a computer science undergrad at RIT. I really like those things where you have to come up with ciphers or decode things. And those types of puzzles are a lot of fun. A lot more enjoyable than coming up with an algorithm. All right. I will see you in another video. Thanks for watching and have a great night.